Steph Curry said this out west. The rumor mill and all that stuff is part of the nature of the NBA. You know how quickly things can change, but I like where we're at. And so, as I bring Windy and Nick Friedell into the conversation this morning, Windy, the one thing we didn't hear from anybody is any shutting of the door or anything like that, which leaves it open, which is just delightful for all of us, on the possibility that the impossible does ultimately happen and Kevin Durant winds up back in Golden State.
Yeah, I think this says a lot about the Warriors organization, that they would be coming off a championship and Steph Curry coming off a crowning moment in his career, and he wouldn't slam the door shut on this. Steph Curry's got the kind of clout where he could shut this down, but he's not, and Joe Lacob is not. Now, I should point out that on that same podcast, Joe Lacob said his payroll is not going to get to $400 million, which it would in all likelihood in a Kevin Durant trade. There's also the complication of Andrew Wiggins and Ben Simmons not being allowed to be on the same roster. I know those are, pesky details, but, I think the reality is that the league is sniffing that the price tag for Durant may not be as high as the Nets wanted. And if the price tag maybe slips a little bit, which is maybe what we're looking at the end of this, what is now turning into a stalemate, some teams that were just sort of casual bystanders in the first round may be like, wait a minute, maybe we should get in on this bidding. And I think, in fairness, you have to put the Warriors on that list. I don't think it's likely, but I think it would be irresponsible of me to say scratch them off.
All right, let me set up the insight here that Nick Friedell can offer to us, because you covered KD his last season in Golden State. You covered him the entirety of the time that he and Kyrie were in Brooklyn, and you're now in Vegas at the Summer League, where Joe Lacob was at the game last night. So I just want to make sure everyone understands the background, Nick, as I ask you your perspective on what Lacob said, I guess on what Steph said, and the possibilities here.
Greeny, it would really surprise me if this reunion actually happened. But if I learned anything covering that Warriors team the last 4 years before I went to Brooklyn, with Joe Lacob running the show, anything's possible. And if Steph walks in the office and he says, Joe, we got to make this happen, then guess what? It's probably going to happen. But saying all that, having been here the last couple days in Vegas, that deal, what it would take to bring Kevin, and Brian's right, the Nets aren't getting right now what they thought, but it would still be a lot, and it would be all the Warriors' young pieces who they like immensely. Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, James Wiseman played last night. He looked really good going up and down the floor. And then what Andrew Wiggins gave them, Greeny, was something special in that playoff run. He is beloved right now inside that organization. So there were a lot of hard feelings at the end of that Durant relationship in Oakland. There's a reason everybody moved on. I do think they could get through it, but it would take a lot on both sides to make it happen, on top of what they'd have to give up from an asset standpoint.
That's fair. I mean, the relationship piece of it, though, is, look, I'm old enough to remember when KD and Kyrie were dying to play together. So those things tend to be fluid, particularly in the NBA. So, Windy, here's what I've been waiting to ask you. And then, as I've been following this to some degree from afar on my travels, if the Nets aren't getting everything that they could ever possibly imagine from him, what exactly would keep them from saying, let's bring this championship team back together? Why wouldn't they just say, KD, you're under contract for 4 years. Kyrie, you opted in. Let's give this a shot with Ben Simmons, put a piece or two around it, and try and win a title while we're all here. Isn't that what? I shouldn't phrase it that way. It feels to me like that should be the likeliest scenario here. Tell me why it isn't.
Well, the first issue is that Durant has a trade request in, and so you'd have to, get on the same page with him. I think where the Nets are right now is, as I mentioned earlier, they don't have the trade offers that they like. And you can imagine if you put your house for sale and you didn't get the offers that you wanted and you didn't have to move, then you could take your house off the market and try it again. That is something the Nets have plausible deniability in. But I got to tell you, as I talk to league executives out there, they don't believe that that's necessarily going to happen. They believe that that is the Nets posturing at this point. Unless Durant gives some sort of indication he's on board with it, it's not affecting the offers yet. Now, we are in the second week of July. We have 2.5 months till the start of the season. There is no reason for anybody to get drastic with their moves right now, but the Nets making this maneuver and sort of letting it be known in the market, Greeny, that they might have Durant just come back, I think is a reaction to the offers they're getting. And then you have the Kyrie aspect of this, where I just cannot see the Nets bringing Kyrie Irving back. And if Kyrie Irving is not back, I can't see Kevin Durant rescinding his trade request. So it's there on the table. I can't deny it. I don't think the league believes it's a likely scenario either.
Fidel, fill in some of the blanks here on that, because the Kyrie of it all is fascinating, and we're going to get a little more into the Lakers' side of this a little bit later in this hour. But how about that piece of it? The idea that if Kyrie can't come back, then there's nothing really for KD. There's no reason for him to remain there.
Greeny, it depends on who you talk to, because I've talked to people even the last couple days, and they say that relationship with KD and Kyrie is still close, but it's not as close as it appeared to be sometimes throughout the season. Because remember, Kevin stood up for Kyrie publicly at every turn. But in the last few weeks, that relationship for now appears to be fraying just a little bit at times, at least behind the scenes. But until Kevin says something on either direction, nobody knows for certain. But it has been really interesting being out here and being at these games, because Sean Marks, Brooklyn's GM, he can't walk 5 feet without being asked the same question that everybody wants to know, which is what's going on with KD. So I think there is something that people aren't talking about enough as far as Brooklyn's position is concerned. Time is on their side. And when you sit and talk to everybody in the organization and league executives all around Vegas here, they're saying they're going to let it play out. And they're going to hope, if it doesn't play out in these next couple months, that Kevin says, you know what? Let's give it a chance here. But I don't think it is directly connected to whether or not Kyrie stays or goes. And I'm with Brian on this. That was the most miserable team I have been around in all my years covering the league at the end of the season. If the Nets bring Kyrie back into training camp and start the season with him playing on this team, that would stun me.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.